In recent history, there had been two wars between China and Japan. The first war was fought in 1894. The Qing Empire was defeated. But in the Second War, the Republic of China won the final victory in 1945. We are here to faithfully present to you the history of sad and tragic events which occurred over half a century, especially the last 8 years, from 1937 to 1945. After the Battle of Wuhan, Chiang Kai-shek called a military meeting at Lanier, and an important decision was made at that meeting. Chiang Kai-shek wanted to start two offensives in the last 2 months of 1939. Despite the icy and chilling cold weather, he wanted the Chinese army to fight two brilliant battles. So he arranged the deployment of the Chinese army and expanded the present 5 combat theatres to 10 combat theatres. The new offensives were aimed at the Japanese army now stationed at the 2nd, 3rd, 5th and 9th combat theatres. The other combat theatres would also coordinate an attack of the Japanese army in order to support the main offensives. Therefore, the order was issued to all combat theatres and an all-out offensive initiated by the Chinese army began. The commanding officer of the 1st Combat Theatre, General Chiang Ding-wen, led his troops to attack the Japanese army in the area south of Mount Tai-Hang-san and north of the Yellow River. General Xie Ye of the 9th Combat Theatre crossed the Yangtze River and attacked the Japanese army on the north side of the river. General Li Tung-zen of the 5th Combat Theatre moved to the east and crossed the Qianghe River, then penetrated the rear of the Japanese army defence line and approached the city of Wuhan. General Gu Zu-tung of the 3rd Combat Theatre led his troops toward the north of Jiangxi and south of Anhui. Battles broke out everywhere, from north to south and east to west. Reports arriving at the Japanese Army headquarters caused confusion. What was happening out there? The Chinese offensive continued till the end of February 1940. During the offensives, more than 1,340 battles were recorded, and 550,000 Chinese soldiers were involved in these battles. Later, after the battles, the Japanese conducted a review regarding the Chinese winter offensives. The declassified report from the Japanese Ministry of Army indicated that the response and the evaluation of the Chinese Army winter offensive could be concluded in 3 points. Firstly, the Chinese winter offensive was the largest during the 8-year war. It involved the main forces from both sides and fought the most decisive battles. Although we won the battle at last, we suffered heavy casualties. Secondly, the entire front of the Japanese 11th Corps was attacked by the Chinese army. The situation changed because the Chinese army withdrew 14 divisions from the Hunan area to support the battles in southern China. Otherwise, the Japanese army may not have won the battle. And third, the Japanese army did not engage in an active offensive that year, as it should have. Therefore, it provided the opportunity for the Chinese army to launch a strong winter offensive. Thus, it was the darkest time of Japanese army since the war started with China. But as we speak now, in regard to this winter offensive, the Chinese army did not regain ground from the Japanese. But from the declassified war records, it indicated the shock experienced by the Japanese army. In their report, at the front of the 11th Corps of Japanese Army was the 5th and the 9th Combat Theatres. And supporting the battle in southern China were the battles of Guangxi and the Battle of Kwenlun-Guan. On November 15, 1939, the Japanese Army's 5th Division, led by General Imamura, joined with the brigade from Taiwan, led by General Shiota, and were escorted by the Japanese Navy 5th Fleet. They landed at Qingzhou-Warn Bay in the Guangdong province, despite the bad weather. Then they divided the troops into 3 columns and moved forward across the hills. The middle column took Datang and approached Lanling from the south. The left wing took Fengchen and went around Zipushu, then reached the rear of Lanling. The right wing went to Qingxian and attacked Zitang at the northeast of Lanling. The Chinese army could not hold the ground. On November 24, Lanling fell into Japanese hands. On December the 4th, the Japanese army took Kwenlun-Guan. At that time, General Bai Song-shi made a request to the central government. He wanted to lead the troops from Guangxi back to their homeland and fight the Japanese there. Chiang Kai-shek agreed. He sent additional troops, including the central government troops, a total of 154,000 men, placing them under the control of General Bai Song-shi. Chiang Kai-shek hoped that General Bai Song-shi would win the battle over the Japanese army on his homeland. At this critical time, the Hunan-Guangxi railway line provided a very important role. In less than 20 days, this railway line transported enough vanguard of Chinese army into the battlefield that was totally unexpected by Japanese General Imamura. Because the province of Guangxi was a hilly area, the battlefield extended from Serlong and Gaofengyi to Yujiang. This area was all but the hills. It was impossible to have the large number of Chinese army moving through this area easily. On the morning of December 18, the artillery fire broke out on top of the hill. Then General Imamura discovered the Chinese army was already on the outskirts of Kwenlun-Guan. General Bai Song-shi was the commanding officer of the Chinese army counterattack. Under his command was the 4th Combat Theatre, led by General Zhang Fa-kuei, a total of 25 divisions. They moved from the north, west and east toward Lanling. On the west front, around Da Gaofeng, was the Chinese 16th Army Group, led by General Sha Wei. On the east front were 4 divisions, led by General Tai King Kai. The main force of Chinese army was in the north. It had 13 divisions under the command of the 38th Army Group, General Xu Tingyao. General Xu Tingyao assigned the 5th Corps, led by General Du Yuming, as the vanguard. The 200th Division, led by General Dian Lan, was assigned as the main force to attack the Japanese army. On December 18, the Chinese artillery opened fire on Kwenlun-Guan. The concentration of artillery fire shocked the ground. After a while, the horn to charge sounded on the Chinese army front, and the troops from the Chinese 200th Division charged the Japanese army positions. That worried Japanese General Imamura, so immediately he ordered the Nakamura Brigade, now in the Lanling area, to reinforce Kwenlun-Guan. But when the Nakamura Brigade left the city, they were immediately intercepted by the Chinese army, led by General Sha Wei, at Zitang and Wutang, and the battle line of the Nakamura Brigade was cut into several sections. Not for long, this Japanese brigade was forced into a defensive battle. The Chinese Air Force also joined the battle. They flew the few surviving aeroplanes and made more than 100 sorties. They continuously bombed the Japanese positions and coordinated with the Chinese land troops. This coordination in the Battle of Kwenlun-Guan was the first time the Chinese air and land forces united together to combat the Japanese army since the war began on July 7, 1937. In addition to this new tactic, the newly formed Chinese tank troops also joined the battle. On December 21, Japanese General Imamura recalled the troops assigned to attack Zhenlan-guan and ordered them to reinforce Kwenlun-guan, but they were also ambushed by the Chinese army from the east and westerly directions. Until the 24th of December, the Japanese brigade, led by General Nakamura, still could not approach Kwenlun-guan to rescue their comrades. In such a situation, General Nakamura had no choice but ordered his troops to break out of the encirclement. General Nakamura was the commander of a Japanese troop called the Army of Steel. However, he was killed by the Chinese army on that day at the Chitung battlefield. The Battle of Kwenlun-guan continued for another week. It was a fierce battle for 7 days.
昆仑关是两边一个山，中这个是一条马路啊，不要走这个马路才能够过去。连一个树林啊要几百枪，从山都打平了，那个树啊，两面那么大都打光了的。我们师长这个嘛，第90师长啊，郑国民啊，郑国民他是什么？
Kwenlun-guan was recaptured by the Chinese army on the last day of 1939. In February 1940, the Japanese sent reinforcements from Guangdong and retook Kwenlun-guan. However, by the end of February, the Chinese army had recaptured it again. Therefore, the battle waged on. By November 1940, the Battle of South Guangxi was finally over. The Battle of Kwenlun-guan was the first time the Chinese army had won a battle to capture a fortified city, and it meant a lot to the Chinese. In 1940, the Japanese Minister of Army, General Hata Shunruko, ordered the commander of 11th Corps, General Sonobe Kazukiro, to launch a new offensive in April toward the Chinese 5th Combat Theatre. So the Japanese 11th Corps concentrated 3 divisions in the north of Hubei. They were the 3rd, 13th and the 39th Divisions, joined with 2 detachments from the north of Hunan, a total of 100,000 men. This time the Japanese army applied different tactics. They moved forward separately, but attacked the same target. They aimed at the 5th Combat Theatre under the command of General Li Tongzhen. This attack actually was a revenge attack. The battle began at Zhaoyang, north of Hubei, and ended at Yicheng. So this battle was called the Battle of Zhaoyang and Yicheng. At that time, the 5th Combat Theatre had about 37 Chinese divisions stationed there. They were deployed into 3 defence lines, the left, middle and the right. On May 1, 1940, the Japanese Army 3rd Division broke the left-wing defence line of the Chinese Army. They took Beiyang on May 5 and Tanghe on May 7. Then the Japanese Army made a U-turn towards Zhaoyang. However, the Chinese Motorised Corps at Chesun moved to the west and recaptured Tanghe. Then they began to follow every movement of the Japanese Army. The 13th Division of Japanese Army began to move out from Zhongxiang on May 6. First, they took Fenglehe and then Tianjiaji. Then they joined with the 3rd Division at Sangjiaji on May 8. On May 4, 1940, the 39th Japanese Division moved west from Suixian. They confronted the Chinese Army's 174th Division of 84th Corps at Tangxian. The 174th Division was fighting the rearguard battle to cover the retreat of the Chinese main forces. They applied a tactic of engaging and retreating. Over here, the commander of this 174th Division, General Sun Yi, was killed. He was ambushed by the Japanese army while breaking out of the encirclement. His division fought to the last 30 men. When General Sun Yi found he was trapped and had no chance to break out of the encirclement, he decided to kill himself. He was 39 years old. On that day, Zhaoyang fell into Japanese hands. However, the Japanese army did not capture the Chinese main forces as they had expected. On the same day, the Japanese army joined together west of Zhaoyang in an area called the Xiangdong Plain, located between the Tonghe River and the Baihe River. The retreating Chinese army main force now formed a counter-encirclement of the Japanese army. On May 10, a total strength of 4 army groups of Chinese forces began to attack the Japanese army from Tonghe, Xingye and Guanghua. The Chinese force divided into 3 columns, the left, central and right wings, with the aim of attacking the Japanese main force. However, the Japanese army was a well-equipped and trained force. Facing the attack from such large numbers of Chinese soldiers, they stayed composed. Despite suffering heavy casualties, their fighting ability was still intact. Therefore, the encirclement, which was aimed to destroy the Japanese army, turned into a fierce and deadly battle. On May 13, the Japanese army broke out of the encirclement and moved in a southerly direction. But they were blocked by the right-wing troops led by General San Zizong at Huanglongdang and Fengjiaji. The Japanese army commander, Sonobe Kazukiro, was told that General San Zizong had led 5 Chinese divisions across the Han River and had entered the battlefield. So he was concerned. Therefore, he began to concentrate the 13th and 39th Divisions and the Ikeda detachment and move them to the south. But actually, General San Zizong had received an order in early May, ordering him to move to the east and cross the Qianghe River to intercept the Japanese army. Now, only the 74th Division was left on the west side of Qianghe River. In other words, General San Zizong had only the 74th Division joined with a battalion from his headquarters. On May 8, General San Zizong led the 74th Division to fight a fierce battle with the Japanese army at Xinjie. On May 9th, General San Zizong moved north into Yushan and fought another battle. By May 11, Japanese commander General Sonobe detected the position of General San Zizong. He ordered his troops to encircle San Zizong. The battle continued for 5 days and nights. The Chinese exhausted their supplies and ammunition, but General San Zizong held his position until May 16, when he was killed on the battlefield, where he met his own prediction. He died for his country. Along with him, General Zhang Qing and many other soldiers were all killed. They all fought to the bitter end with the Japanese army at Mount Zi Li Changsan, near Languadian. These people gave their last blood to protect their nation against the Japanese aggression. General San Zizong was killed in the afternoon under a dark cloud. At that time, the 4th Division of the Japanese army took over control of the Pinhan railway line. Thus, the Japanese army then had the ability to bring in more troops to attack Yichang. In early June 1940, the Japanese army moved to the west and crossed the Qianghe River, then turned in a southerly direction. Thus, the cities of Jingmen, Danyang and Sazi all fell into Japanese hands. A detachment of the 13th Division of the Japanese army moved from Baisayang towards the west and approached Yichang. Yichang was now in danger. Yichang was the gateway to the Chinese war capital, Tongqing, and was on the wide waterway of the Yangtze River. If Yichang fell into Japanese hands, Tongqing would become vulnerable, as well as cutting off communication between the 5th and 9th combat theatres. At this time, General Chen Chen was ordered to reinforce Yichang. Yichang fell to the Japanese army on June 14. On June 15, General Chen Chen ordered a counterattack. The Chinese army in the north, who had been following the movements of the Japanese army, now began a counterattack. They recaptured the cities of Xiangyang, Yichen, Jingmen and Danyang. The 18th Corps of the Chinese army, led by General Pang San, once entered the city of Yichang, but they could not recapture Yichang.
我们一个师哈只下来了4个人，全部没有。
On July 1940, the Chinese Military Council established the 6th Combat Theatre in the Yichang area. The commanding officer was General Chen Chen. He said, "We would have more battles in this area." On August 22, 1940, Chiang Kai-shek received a telegram from Hubei and Ta Ha-er combat theatres. In this telegram it wrote, "To Chiang Kai-shek, the overall outline of the telegram was this: to knock out the enemy intention and to coordinate the battle of other Chinese armies in the south of Shanxi and central China, and to protect the Chinese northwest region. We decided to organise troops of 100 regiments and would launch an offensive aimed at the Zhejiang to Taiyan railway line. This battle has been in preparation for 1 month already. But we were concerned with the possibility of a leak of this telegram to the Japanese, so we did not report it earlier. The plan was followed, including the distribution of the troops based on the battle plans. At the end it requested that this message be distributed to other combat theatres and hoped the other Chinese forces would take action to delay the response of the Japanese army in order to assist the battle." 2 signatories appeared at the end, Zhu De and Peng De-wei. The telegram was dated August 22. After July 7, 1937, the Chinese Communist Party made a declaration they would join the other parties to fight for the country against the Japanese aggression. This declaration was signed by Mao Zedong, Zhu De, Zhou Enlai, Peng De-wei and Ho Lun. They sent this declaration to Chiang Kai-shek to express their willingness to fight the Japanese aggression. In this declaration, they would put the Red Army under the command of Chiang Kai-shek. They wanted to fight for the nation and to protect their homeland. Chiang Kai-shek had doubts about the Communist Party, but in this situation, the only option available to him was to accept the request. Therefore, the Red Army was assigned the name of No. 8 Route Army. The military council in Tongqing was surprised to receive the telegram sent by Zhu De and Peng De-wei. They analysed the content and found mobilising troops of 100 regiments required more than 500,000 men. This indicated that the force of the Communist Party grew tenfold in just 3 years, an incredible speed of growth. The Chinese central government already had the information. The troops of the Communist Party took the opportunity to expand their numbers but did very little to fight with the Japanese army. Despite this, they called themselves the guerrilla force. It was an unbelievable matter that they sent the request and offered to attack the Japanese army. But considering the overall goal of the Chinese people, Chiang Kai-shek issued the command to all combat theatres, ordering them to monitor the Japanese army movements and delay them sending troops to the north. Chiang Kai-shek also ordered that General Wei Li Wang, commander of the 1st Combat Theatre, dispatch troops to assist the offensive of the so-called the Battle of 100 Regiments. It was indeed conducted directly by the Communist Party force, the 18th Army Group. It was a large offensive occurring southeast of the Shanxi province, around the south section of Zhejiang and Taiyan railway line, Tangpu railway line and the Jingxing mining area. The Japanese army was shocked and surprised by the initial attacks carried out by the No. 8 Route Army. General Peng De-wei led his troops attacking in various locations along the railway line, thus confusing the Japanese army. They did not comprehend what was happening. When they figured out the situation, the Chinese No. 8 Route Army had vanished. The details of the Battle of 100 Regiments and the outcomes were seldom mentioned in the history of the Sino-Japanese War. War historians of the Communist Party did not reach the same conclusion about this battle. Some praised it, but others didn't. However, that was not the end of the story. After winter, the Japanese concentrated a large number of troops and sought revenge on the Chinese army, and it was a dragnet-like attack. This made the Chinese No. 8 Route Army retreat to the west. In this battle, the Chinese No. 8 Route Army suffered more than 100,000 casualties. The area under their control diminished to half. However, more troubles were to follow. The strength of the 100 Regiment's attacking force from the Communist Party had attracted the attention of the Japanese army, and it was the main cause of many massacres, which the Japanese army committed. The crimes of brutality and mopping up, cleansing and killing the villages in the areas under Japanese control. Many civilians were slaughtered by the Japanese army in the period of 2 years after the Battle of 100 Regiments. It has been